This is the new Canyon Aeroad CFR, the latest and greatest aero road bike from the German direct sales giant. Building on the success of the much admired Aeroad CF SLX, this new model has been in development for over 4 years, and Canyon claims it is the fastest race bike on the market. But before we go any further, a huge thank you to our sponsors Freewheel for providing me with this lovely kit to ride in. If you like the look of anything I'm wearing, you can find a link to it in the description below. Unlike some brands that are converging their aero and climbing bikes into one do-it-all bike, Canyon has gone almost all in on aerodynamic efficiency with the new Aeroad. That doesn't mean it's heavy though. This size medium weighs just 7.4 kilos without pedals, but Canyon clearly thinks that sacrificing a few hundred grams for a bit of added aero efficiency is worth it, and you won't find me disagreeing with that. From the outside, the changes versus the old Aeroad are quite subtle, but that's perhaps no bad thing. The old Aeroad is still a great bike, and was still being ridden at this year's Tour de France after all. For the new model though, Canyon has worked with aero experts Swiss side to do extensive CFD and wind tunnel analysis to optimise every part of the bike even further than before. Perhaps the most obvious change is that the camtail aerofoil tubes on the frame set have gotten overall a bit deeper and a bit wider. Now this should mean they are a little bit more aerodynamically efficient, which is what you want if you like riding bikes fast. Canyon does note though that the tubes aren't as deep as the UCI rules actually allow. It said that it could have made the tubes even deeper and even more aerodynamically efficient, but it would have involved making sacrifices in ride quality and ergonomics that it didn't feel were warranted. What they've tried to do is balance the aero features with the fact that ultimately we don't actually ride bikes in wind tunnels. The biggest changes, however, have arguably taken place where you can't see them. So let's start with the seat post. From the outside, it looks like your typical deep section aero seat post, but what you're actually looking at is a much thinner structural seat post surrounded by a non-structural carbon shroud, or a fairing if the UCI aren't listening. This, Canyon claims, allows it to be simultaneously both lighter, more aerodynamic and more comfortable than the previous Aeroad seat post. The previous Aeroad used an oversized 1¼ inch steerer tube, could take a standard handlebar and stem, and had semi-external cable routing. But the new model uses a completely new proprietary system that fully integrates the cables for improved aerodynamics and allows you to change the handlebar height without having to cut the steerer tube. It's quite complicated to explain how it works, but essentially it's a bit like a quill stem. The fork shaft is split into 2 parts. One is the fork and the other is the handlebar. These 2 parts interface with each other inside the head tube and are locked together by a clamping screw and a wedge system. In practice, the system is quite simple to use, and crucially, Canyon says that the system is self-locking, meaning the handlebar will stay in place with the bars facing the right direction even if the clamping screw hasn't been properly secured. The major upshot of this system is that you can then change the handlebar height by up to 15mm without having to cut the steerer tube or run spacers above the stem. The downside is that this system means this bike is only compatible with this handlebar. So if you don't like it, that's tough. And while Canyon has adjusted the geometry of the new Aeroad to make it less aggressive and bring it in line with its lightweight climbing bike, the Ultimate, that 15mm of height adjustment is also all you get. So if you want to run higher handlebar position, you're also out of luck. Lastly, it also means a proprietary tool is required to adjust the headset bearing preload. It's pretty easy to use, but the tool itself is disappointingly plasticky. I'd have liked to have seen something of slightly higher quality, considering you'll have to keep it for as long as you have the bike, even if it's likely that it won't actually see that much use. The handlebar itself does have another trick up its sleeve though. To make the bike easy to ship and for you to travel with, the wings of the integrated handlebar are actually removable. Canyon has also made the removable wings long enough to afford 40mm of overall width adjustment. That means you can choose a narrower cockpit for better aerodynamics or a wider one for better leverage. On this size medium, you can choose between having a 430mm a 410mm or a 390mm wide handlebar. Of course, being very narrow myself, I've gone for the 390mm option to optimise the aerodynamics. The integrated stem does, however, mean that reach isn't adjustable, but Canyon is keen to stress that customers will be able to choose a different length cockpit if required. But as with most integrated handlebars on the market, not everyone will be able to get exactly what they want. The longest stems only come with the widest handlebars, for example, and vice versa. Despite all of these changes, however, Canyon says that the new integrated cockpit is actually 37 grams lighter than the previous integrated cockpit found on the old Aeroad CF SLX. It also claims that the fully integrated cables can save up to 3 watts versus externally routed cables on the old handlebar. It also claims that as a complete bike with a rider and 2 water bottles, it's an average of 5.4 watts more aerodynamically efficient across a range of yaw angles from plus to minus 20 degrees. Canyon also claims that under certain conditions, the new Aeroad will also experience lift or a sailing effect, where essentially the drag turns negative and you're getting pushed along by the wind. I'd happily admit that that sounds far too good to be true, but Canyon's engineers are adamant that it is there, even at lower yaw angles, though they also acknowledge that you're only really likely to notice it at higher yaw angles. There is some debate around the actual yaw angles a road cyclist will typically experience while riding in the real world. But Canyon says it has designed the new Aeroad based on real-world wind data from Germany and its extensive aero testing with Swisside, and it's confident that these claims stand up to scrutiny. CFR stands for Canyon Factory Racing and is essentially Canyon's halo brand for its Uber bikes. Like Specialized and its S-Works brand, this basically means that Canyon uses its lightest, stiffest and most expensive carbon fibre to bring us the best of what it can produce right now. The result is that the new Aeroad CFR frameset is 14% stiffer than the old Aeroad CF SLX frameset, according to Canyon, whilst still being, as already mentioned, 168 grams lighter. Just to be clear, that quoted weight includes the frame, the seat post, and the new integrated handlebar. Looking solely at the frame, the new Aeroad CFR weighs 945 grams versus 1010 grams for the old Aeroad CF SLX. The new fork is also 20 grams lighter than the outgoing model. Below the CFR sits the CF SLX and CF SL tiers. The middle tier CF SLX and the bottom tier CF SL frames use the same tube shapes as the top of the range CFR versions. However, they have slightly different carbon layups than the CFR version, meaning they're slightly heavier and as a result have a slightly lower stiffness to weight ratio. At the time of filming, we haven't got confirmed weights for the CF SLX or the CF SL frame sets, but when we do, we'll add them to the video description below, or you'll be able to find them on BikeRadar.com. The CF SL models also use mechanical group sets with semi-external cable routing because the integrated handlebar is only compatible with electronic drivetrains. While at the CFR and CF SLX levels, the frame sets are only compatible with electronic drivetrains. Prices start at €3,299 for the CF SL version with mechanical Shimano Ultegra and Reynolds carbon wheels. For the CF SLX version, prices start at €4,999 for a build with Shimano Ultegra Di2 and DT Swiss carbon wheels. That rises to €8,999 for the top spec CFR version with Campagnolo Super Record EPS and Campagnolo Bora 1 Aero wheels. There's a lot to take in here, so for the details of all the builds and for confirmed UK and US pricing, follow the link in the description or head to BikeRadar.com. This particular build though costs €7,499 and comes with a Shimano Dura Ace Di2 group set and 62mm DT Swiss Arc 1100 die-cut carbon aero wheels. The new Aeroad comes spec'd with a 25mm Continental GP 5000 clincher tyre on the front and a 28mm version of the same tyre on the rear. Canyon says this offers the best balance of aero and comfort, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. While €7,499 is obviously not cheap, it does represent pretty good value compared to the competition. Of course, Canyon manages this by being a direct sales only brand. That means you can't walk into a physical bike shop and buy one of these. Instead, you have to order it online and Canyon will deliver it to your door. And like many other 2021 road bikes, the new Aeroad is disc brake only. So, how does it ride? Well, first things first, in the right conditions, this is a very fast bike. When you get on a good stretch of road, your average speed noticeably increases for the same effort, even around the 30 km/h mark that most amateurs like myself tend to ride at. And as the deep, stout tubes suggest, it's also an incredibly stiff and efficient feeling bike. Whether you're sprinting, climbing or ploughing through fast corners, it doesn't waste any of your effort and you get a real sense of purpose out of it. And while it's not a bike specifically designed for climbing, the combination of an ultra stiff frame set and a competitively light build mean it's no slouch there either. It's particularly good on longer, shallower climbs where the aerodynamics of the bike can still make a significant difference, especially if you're climbing in a group at higher speeds. It can be a bit of a handful in crosswinds, and part of that can undoubtedly be attributed to the deep section wheels, but as long as you pay attention, it's really not a problem, and it really flies in a tailwind. Although I'm not always a fan of fully integrated handlebars, this one does at least have a very comfortable drop shape, and the tops aren't so big that they're uncomfortable to hold either. There's also no denying that it looks incredibly slick, and the included GPS computer mount is a nice high quality touch too. It includes swappable mounts for both Garmin and Wahoo GPS computers, and it's also adjustable for computers of different sizes so it doesn't leave you with a problem to solve. I also very much like that you can change the width of the handlebar, as the fixed fit parameters are usually my biggest gripe with these types of handlebars. If I had it my way, the handlebar would be able to go even narrower, but as you can see, I am a paper-thin wisp of a man, and 390mm is likely to be narrow enough for most aero obsessives. As you'd expect, the Shimano Dura Ace Di2 group set is fantastic, and the 52-36 tooth chain set and 11 to 28 tooth cassette represent a decent spread of gears for a race bike like this. It doesn't really help you go any faster than mechanical Dura Ace or Ultegra Di2, but it's lightweight, it works fuss-free, it's very quiet and it looks very bling. It's also great to see a Shimano FC R9100P dual-sided power meter included as stock. It's something of a recent trend for brands to spec power meters as standard on their top-end bikes, and it adds a lot of value to the build. If you prefer SRAM or Campagnolo, there are also CFR build options for Red ETAP and Super Record EPS, although they are a little bit more expensive. On the other hand, the new Aero does start to suffer a little bit on rougher roads, and I think part of the blame lies with the wheel set. They're a pair of the older DT Swiss ARC 1100 die-cut wheels that are spec'd on the outgoing Aeroad CF SLX. DT Swiss has released an updated wheel set for 2021, but unfortunately these are not those wheels. The issue is that the front wheel has a relatively narrow 17mm internal rim width, and this means the 25mm tyre spec'd on it comes up quite narrow at around 25mm dead on when inflated. The rear wheel, on the other hand, features a different rim with a much wider 20mm internal width. This means the 28mm tyre spec'd on it comes up actually slightly larger, around 29.5 to 30mm when inflated. As a consequence, the bike feels a little bit unbalanced and can get a little bit chattery when the roads get rough. On decent roads, the new Aeroad is a great descender. The stiff Aero frame set and wheels carry a lot of speed, and the Continental tyres are exceptionally grippy in the corners. But on the rough stuff, with cracks in the road, potholes, or even just loose stones, the difference between the rear and the front becomes slightly more evident. The fork does have clearance for up to a 30mm tyre, so you could swap in a larger tyre on the front, but you would have to sacrifice a little bit on the Aero side, as the wheel is optimised for a 25mm tyre. As it happens, we actually did have a set of the newer DT Swiss wheels in to test at BikeRadar.com, so I took the opportunity to try them out on this bike. The new wheel set has a wider 20mm internal rim width at the front, and this means the 25mm tyre measures closer to 27mm when it's actually inflated. 2mm might not sound like much, but that bit of extra volume, combined with the slight decrease in tyre pressure it affords, does make a noticeable difference to how the bike soaks up road imperfections. When I put this to Canyon, it did say that the new wheel sets should start appearing on this bike in early 2021. But it is a slight shame they won't be on this bike at launch, as DT Swiss also claims the new wheels are slightly more aero and have improved hubs versus these wheels. Of course, if you only ride on beautiful, freshly laid tarmac, then all of this won't really be a concern for you, but it's just worth taking into consideration what the roads where you live are actually like. In summary then, the new Aeroad CFR is slightly lighter and slightly faster than its predecessor. It's also still a fair bit cheaper than much of the competition. As usual with Canyon, you're getting a lot of bike and a lot of spec for your money. The CFR frameset and subsequent builds are also competitively light for an aero bike, and though we know aero trumps weight most of the time, this essentially means you don't even need to worry about it. In general terms, this is a very fast bike. If you like riding from A to B as fast as possible, or you like sprinting for town signs or finish lines, then you'll love this bike. So in that sense, what's not to like? If you're happy with the fit parameters of the integrated handlebars and you tend to ride on fairly decent roads, there's really very little to complain about, especially at this price. So, would I buy one? Well, sadly, I don't have €7,500 to spend. But if I did, I'd be sorely tempted because it's very hard not to love how fast this bike is in a lot of conditions. However, as someone who sadly has to ride on a lot of pretty awful roads, I'd be tempted to wait for the new wheel set to start shipping with this bike. But what do you think? As full bongo aero race bikes edge ever closer to the UCI weight limit, is there still a meaningful compromise between aero and weight? Are black bikes still cool, or would you prefer to see something spicier from Canyon? As always, let us know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the little bell icon so that every time we upload a video, you get a notification.